Okay, so I'm gonna go over the example we went in class. That way you can prepare for the next class when we're gonna expand on this topic. So the example is the following. So we have two countries, USA and China, trading, or not trading at the beginning, but just producing two goods, iPhones and Angry Birds. The first table give you the hours they need to produce one unit. So for instance, US needs 4 hours to produce an iPhone and 2 hours to produce an Angry Bird. China needs 5 hours to produce an iPhone and 10 hours to produce an Angry Bird. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to assume a particular number of hours they have to produce these two goods and see how many they can produce. So let's assume that they actually have 20 hours to produce each product. In total, they have 40 hours. So in essence, they have 40 hours total, and they're going to split the 40 hours, 20 hours for one good and 20 hours for the other good. Now remember that now we are going to go from the table that we're going to have now. It's going to have the units they can produce. The first table will give you the hours they need to produce one unit. This table is going to give you the units they can produce in a particular number of hours. So for instance, if US have 20 hours to produce iPhones, since they need 4 hours to produce one, they can produce 5 iPhones. And since they need 2 hours to produce one Angry Bird, and they have 20 hours to produce them, they can produce in total 10 Angry Birds. China, since they need 5 hours to produce an iPhone and they have 20 hours, they can produce 4 iPhones. And since they need 10 hours to produce an Angry Bird and they have 20 hours total, they can produce 2 Angry Birds. So if we sum the columns, they give you if these are the only two countries in the world, that give you kind of the world production, right? So the US produces 5 iPhones, China produces 4 iPhones, so the world actually makes 9 iPhones. The USA produced 10 Angry Birds, China produced 2 Angry Birds, so the world produces 12 Angry Birds. Okay, so if they don't trade, these are also going to be the units each country is going to consume. So if there's no trade, US produces and consumes 5 iPhones, produces and consumes 10 Angry Birds. China produces and consumes 4 iPhones, and produces and consumes 2 Angry Birds. And what we're going to try to demonstrate by introducing trade is that these countries will be able to consume more than they consume with no trade. For instance, US is going to be able to consume more than 5 iPhones and more than 10 Angry Birds. And China is going to be able to consume more than 4 iPhones and more than 2 Angry Birds. And then I ask you to organize this information in the following table, because this is going to have all the categories that you're going to need. And the categories for the new table, and this is this table right here. So in the first table, we have the table at the top is the table we had at the bottom in the previous slide, right? So these are the number of units they produce. If they spend 20 hours on each product and there's no trade, they will consume the same thing they produce. So the US will consume and produce 5 iPhones, consume and produce 10 Angry Birds. China consume and produces 4 iPhones and consume and produces 2 Angry Birds, and so forth. Now with trade, these are the the potential categories here. So we first want to explore how much they're going to produce, and they don't have to produce. They have 40 hours to produce, but they don't have to split the 40 hours, 20 for one, 20 for the other one. They can actually do whatever they want. So for instance, one country can specialize in one thing and don't produce anything on the other thing. Since they're going to trade, they want to produce at a different rate. Then they're going to decide how much they're going to trade. So for instance, US is going to say, I'll give you so many Angry Birds in exchange of so many iPhones. And then finally, after the trade is completed, then they'll have the new unit that they will consume. The ones they produce plus or minus the ones they trade. So what you should do at this point is to try to see again one more time on your own if you can come up with a trading scheme that will allow each country to consume more of each good. So at the end here in this table right here, you want to have more than US consuming more than 5 iPhones and more than 10 Angry Birds, China consuming more than 4 iPhones and more than 2 Angry Birds. So at the end, right, when you sum up the total down here, this total down here should be larger than 9, and this total down here should be larger than 12. Okay, so see if you can come up with one trading scheme. Try to stick to either whole numbers or fractions of 0.5, But if you want, you can actually don't stick to those things. But there's many different solutions that you can come up with. And then I'm going to separate these videos in two, one with the setup and then one with the solution, so you can actually have time to work it on your own.